Credo in unum Deum, Patrem omnipotentem, Factorem celi et terrae, visibilibus omnium.
Those familiar with the Book of Mormon will likely know the story of Abinadi. Abinadi came among the people preaching repentance, as prophets tend to do in the scriptures. He warned the people that God would allow their enemies to punish them unless they changed their ways and began to live more righteously. This was not appreciated by the people, particularly King Noah, who eventually had Abinadi burned at the stake. Execution by fire, which has to be among the most brutal ways to kill a person, is attested by ancient Babylonian and Egyptian texts from the early 2nd millennium BC. The ancient Near East provides plenty of other examples, including the story of the fiery furnace in chapter 3 of Daniel. Imperial Rome persecuted some early Christians and other dissidents by burning them alive. When Christianity finally began to come into power under Constantine, early Christians were much more peaceful and tolerant to the pagan Romans than the Romans had been to them for the past 3 centuries. After all, they lived the gospel of the Prince of Peace. Except that this isn't actually what happened. Instead, the persecuted became the persecutor. Christian Rome soon began oppressing pagans, razing their temples and tearing down their idols. Pagan property was confiscated and appropriated by the state. Worshipping idols or making sacrifices came to be punishable by death, though it's unclear how often capital punishment was enforced. The Christianity of the late Roman Empire is more remarkable for its internal dissensions, though, than for its mistreatment of non-Christians. Many of the internal disagreements centered around the nature of Christ, and various councils were assembled to decide the issues and establish an orthodoxy codified in the various creeds. Meanwhile, the state became more and more intertwined with the church throughout the 4th century, with Christianity finally being established as the official religion of Rome in 380 AD. This set the stage for civil authorities to start enforcing religious orthodoxy. Competing Christian sects executed heretics using several different methods, including burning. By the early Middle Ages, this practice had essentially died out. For centuries, we really don't hear of heretics being executed. But by the 13th century, the medieval Inquisition began making up for lost time. In order to save the souls of countless people who might fall prey to false ideas, heretics had to be stopped before their delusions infected society. Burning these religious dissidents at the stake was just the right mixture of public spectacle, medieval cruelty, and Christian piety. Let's go back in time now, a couple thousand years, to late First Temple Judaism. The Old Testament describes several capital crimes, but Judaism has always been more concerned with observance of the law and strict obedience than with rigid doctrinal belief. Without doctrinal rigidity comparable to the creeds of Christianity, the concept of heresy doesn't even appear in the Old Testament. The closest crime is blasphemy, which involves actions deemed offensive to God. Blasphemy was normally punishable by stoning, although Achan was apparently stoned and then burned in Joshua 7 for stealing the spoils of Jericho. The point here is that even though execution by burning is an ancient practice, the story of Abinadi's crime and execution does not play out consistent with Old Testament attitudes and practices. So now we are back to Abinadi and Noah in the Book of Mormon. King Noah and his community were a Judaic people who kept the law of Moses. They descended from the prophet Lehi and a core group of followers who had fled Jerusalem just prior to its destruction by the Babylonians early in the 6th century BC. Upon hearing of Abinadi, King Noah was so insulted and enraged that he sought to kill Abinadi, who fled for his life. 2 years later, he got his chance when Abinadi appeared again. Noah had him burnt at the stake, claiming Abinadi's teaching that God himself shall come down among the children of men was a cause worthy of death. As alluded to earlier, it isn't likely that Noah was relying on traditions from the old world in his execution of Abinadi. Instead, it strongly resembles the burning of heretics seen most prominently in Christianity between the 13th and 17th centuries in Europe, which makes this Book of Mormon story anachronistic. I will address these similarities in more detail in part 2 of this series. Going back to medieval Europe now, if the public burning of heretics was designed to keep the Western Christian Church united and its doctrine pure, well, then it failed. The early 1500s gave birth to the Protestant Reformation. By the mid-1500s, the Reformation had gained numerous adherents throughout many parts of Central and Northern Europe. Some of these areas were able to completely free themselves from papal authority and established churches and communities that followed the teachings of Luther, Calvin, and other reformers. When these Protestants came to power, they were much more sympathetic towards those with unorthodox religious views. After all, they had just freed themselves from the intolerant papists. Except that this isn't actually what happened. History repeats itself here, and the persecuted became the persecutor. Protestants in power used their newfound authority primarily against Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were reformers as well. It's just that they were the wrong flavor of reformer. Their Protestant brethren found creative ways to torture and kill them, but drowning was the preferred method since it added delicious irony to drown people who believed in rebaptism. Still, other Anabaptists were beheaded or burnt at the stake. The most famous execution by Protestants, though, did not involve an Anabaptist. No, John Calvin's 1553 execution of Michael Servetus holds that ignominious distinction. Calvin developed an intense personal hatred for this man, who had brazenly criticized his teachings in private letters and vowed to kill him if he ever came to Geneva. In the meantime, Calvin plotted his death by ratting him out to the French Inquisition. In fleeing the French authorities, Servetus fell into Calvin's hands, who made good on his promise and burned Servetus at the stake. Calvin cited Servetus's anti-Trinitarian modalist teachings as the primary capital crime he had committed. The purpose of this series is to examine the Book of Mormon's treatment of Calvinism, starting with its cynical view of the man himself. Exactly 1700 years separate Abinadi's and Servetus's executions if we take the Book of Mormon dates at face value. Numerous thematic and event-specific similarities indicate that Abinadi's story is a literary adaptation of the Servetus affair. With that in mind, we can begin to see what the Book of Mormon has to say about Calvinism. To appreciate the similarities in the stories, we need to understand how Calvin's critics have portrayed him, since the Book of Mormon narrative is clearly critical of Calvin's counterpart, Noah. Calvin's critics portray him as a greedy tyrant and a depraved womanizer. He's egotistical and vindictive. He punishes personal insults and mere disagreement with torture and death. King Noah embodies all the supposed evils of Calvin and more. He's a straw man dressed in Calvin's worst clothing and sitting on Calvin's malevolent throne. Calvin's reputation among his critics as egotistical and vindictive is partially based on his treatment of Servetus and also another man named Jerome Bolsec. Bolsec was a former Catholic and a physician who had fled France to escape persecution for his reform-minded views. While in Geneva, he publicly disagreed with Calvin on certain points of doctrine and in 1551 was imprisoned and put on trial. Calvin claimed Bolsec was trying to divide the people with deadly discord. He hoped for the death penalty, but his more moderate brethren sentenced Bolsec to exile. In 1553, Servetus quietly stopped in Geneva en route to Italy to escape the religious authorities Calvin had sicked on him in France. Like Bolsec, Servetus was also a former Catholic and a physician. According to at least one of his biographers, he was disguised to avoid recognition as he fled. At any rate, when he arrived in Geneva, it was under the pseudonym Michael Villanovanus. The Book of Mormon adaptation of these events merges Bolsec and Servetus, alike in many ways, into a single character, Abinadi. When Abinadi arrived the first time, King Noah was furious. "I command you to bring Abinadi hither, that I may slay him, for he has said these things that he might stir up my people to anger one with another, and to raise contentions among my people." As noted earlier, this was essentially Calvin's accusation against Bolsec. Remember deadly discord? Abinadi, like Bolsec, was able to leave unscathed. 2 years later, Abinadi showed up again, this time in disguise. Like Servetus, who showed up in disguise 2 years after Bolsec had left, Abinadi was arrested and imprisoned. The short time remaining for Abinadi and Servetus followed the same tragic path. They were both tried, found guilty of heresy, the very same heresy in fact, and burned at the stake. The Abinadi story in the Book of Mormon is out of place in time, but you might think the similarities to historical events outlined up to this point are purely coincidental. So we'll need to take a deeper dive into the details of how the stories played out, particularly by examining the trial proceedings and the doctrinal themes. I will do that in part 2 of this series, which will also look more closely at Calvin's teachings compared to those in the Book of Mormon. I will conclude part 1 with side-by-side tables comparing first Noah and Calvin, and then Abinadi and Bolsec/Servetus.
With the thoughts from a militant mind,